بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Can you hear my voice clearly? Somebody could just write on the chat. Okay, great. Inshallah, we'll get started. It's been 5 minutes or 6 minutes past the scheduled time. Welcome to you, dear brothers and sisters. My name is Muhammad Mahdi. I'm speaking with you from the city of Qum, the holy city of Qum, alhamdulillah. As you probably read and saw, the topic of our discussion tonight, not tonight for me at least here in Qom, and also the following week, is to do with the Peace Treaty of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. It's not a very large crowd tonight, so you guys can feel free to also participate and chat if there are any questions you have as I'm presenting this material. I do welcome any comments or questions, at least for the time being. So inshallah, if there's nothing, we will get started. So basically, as you know, the Sulh of Imam al-Hasan, the Sulh of Imam al-Hasan is one of the very difficult aspects of the history of the Ahlul Bayt, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. One of the very difficult aspects that has not been understood properly. Neither was it understood during the time, the year 41 AH, that it transpired, nor has it been understood properly in modern times and as the centuries went by. It is one of the very difficult aspects that needs to be explained properly. And inshallah, the goal of today's session is to pose some fundamental questions after giving a bit of an introduction that we will have to do with the sulh, and then we will begin to answer them. The majority of the questions, inshallah, we will try to answer them in the next week's session. But yeah, just to give a bit of background, first of all, some of the events that happen in history, they become more apparent over time. Initially, there is a lot of confusion, but as time goes by, people realize the reality and the truth of what happened. Maybe there was an agreement between different countries that initially looked good, but over time, as the years went by, people looked back and they said, no, wait a second, that was not a good agreement. One country was being taken advantage of by another country. Other things are the reverse. At the time that some things happen, it's very clear to everybody the reality of what just occurred. But over time, that reality is forgotten. A very good example is there in the lives of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. For those of you who might have attended previous classes that I taught for the academy, you might remember that we had discussed this social political role of the Ahlul Bayt. And we talked about how that was something that was understood at that time. At the time of the Imams, alayhimus salam, everybody knew, or not everybody, but a large amount of people, they knew who the Imams were. They knew why the Imams posed such a threat to the oppressive rulers, and why the oppressive rulers, much to their own danger, they one by one were poisoning the Imams, imprisoning the Imams, getting rid of the Imams. What was that struggle? That struggle, unfortunately, has been almost forgotten, if not its true image has been forgotten or misrepresented over history. So that's an example of something that was clear in the past, but over time it became hidden. However, as I said, this peace treaty or the sulh between Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam and Muawiyah was something that even at that time, the Shia community, many of them did not understand why Imam al-Hasan did what he did. And even now, unfortunately, there is a lot of misrepresentation and unfair judgment of Imam al-Hasan and a lack of understanding. Just to quote one example, in the important book of hadith called Tuhuf al-Uqul, there is this narration there. It's actually the sixth Imam who's talking, and he's telling somebody else about what happened during the sulh and how, as it says before you on this slide, when Al-Hasan bin Ali, peace be upon him, was stabbed and people mutinied. We will discuss this event shortly. He conceded to Muawiyah, that is, he signed the sulh, he abdicated the throne. At this time, his own followers would come to him and they would say to him عليك عليك السلام يا مضل المؤمنين, that peace be upon you, O the one who has done disgrace, who has brought about disgrace to the believers. Imagine what rudeness, what audacity, what disrespect they were showing to their Imam. The Imam alayhi salam, with tolerance and patience, he replied them in this hadith. He said to them, ما أنا بمضل المؤمنين ولكني معز المؤمنين. That you don't know, I am not the one who has disgraced the believers. In fact, I am the one who has given honor to the believers. And then he gives them a very simple explanation of why he did what he did, which inshallah in this course we will open this up in more detail. He says, when I noticed that you were weaker than them, when you, my supporters, were weaker than the army of Muawiyah, than the forces of Muawiyah, I conceded to them. Why? So that you as well as I would remain amongst them. See, Imam Hassan here, he's explaining the philosophy of why he signed the sulh, which of course we are going to discuss in much more detail. But he's saying that so that we, the Shia, could remain alive, so that we were not going to be wiped out and forgotten by history, I had to sign this sulh. And he said this is the same reason that made the alim, referring to Nabi Khidr alayhi salam, in that famous story that I'm sure you are all aware of in Surah Al-Kahf, where he makes a hole in the ship so that that king would not usurp that ship from its rightful owners. Okay, so that's a little bit of background about the sulh. My voice is still clear, right? You guys are with me? Okay, so moving on. Another aspect that has really caused confusion with regards to the whole personality of Imam al-Hasan, and specifically with regards to the sulh, is this very, very unfortunate injustice that has occurred in history. That Imam al-Hasan, God forbid, has been depicted as a womanizer, as somebody who married many, many, many wives and divorced them. If you want an example of how Orientalists have brushed off the whole sulh and tried to simply explain it as the result of Imam al-Hasan, God forbid, being a materialistic person who just wanted to enjoy in the harem, as he says, you can go look at this book. It's a book that was written in the 1930s called History of the Arabs by Philip Hitti, a Lebanese American. Clearly, Philip Hitti, if we give him benefit of the doubt, he didn't do his research properly. And he makes some very, very horrible conclusions about Imam al-Hasan that I don't even want to narrate to you. But the conclusion is this, that this aspect of looking at Imam Hassan as being somebody who just wanted to enjoy in the dunya has also added to the confusion around this sulh. So because of that, very quickly we want to try to discuss this issue of him having many wives, although it is not directly related to our topic in these 2 sessions that we have. Because it is a very important discussion, I thought it is worthy of quickly discussing. So we have hadith in both Shia and Sunni sources of history, sources of hadith. We do have such a hadith that say that Imam al-Hasan married many, many wives. There is an actual Arabic word that is attributed to him called mitlaq. That Imam al-Hasan, God forbid, was somebody who was mitlaq, somebody who divorced many, many women. Unfortunately, these ahadith are even there in our Shia, important books of Shia hadith. And even more unfortunate, some of our great Shia ulama, as a result of having these ahadith in our corpuses, they tried to justify them. And they tried to bring about explanations that, oh, maybe Imam al-Hasan wanted to help these women out financially. Maybe there was a lack of men who are there in the society. And so, there were many women that were widows that he needed to marry. Or they gave other such explanations that don't really work and can't really answer the problems with these narrations. Nowadays, in modern times, great scholars such as Baqir Sharif al-Qurashi, who is an Iraqi scholar who lived in the last century, and other such scholars, they've come to a different conclusion about these ahadith. And the conclusion that they have come to, which is very strong, is that these ahadith were totally, totally fabricated by the Banu al-Abbas. And we'll come to it. We'll come to why right now. These are some of the main uh, pieces of evidence that they bring, are these points that I've put on these slides before you. That first of all, there are issues to do with the chain of narrators of these ahadith. Although in one case perhaps it might appear to be not a weak narration, generally, like all these other ahadith are weak, and even that one, there are certain problems with the book that it's in. Not everything in that book is trustworthy, definitely. So just to give you the names, there are 2 ahadith like this in Al-Kafi and 1 hadith in Mahasin of Baraqi. Anyways, there is detailed analysis of the sanad, or the chain of narrators, has been done to find that there are issues in that chain of narrators. That's one issue. Moreover, we have all these ahadith that talk about how divorce is something very negatively looked upon by Allah Ta'ala, by the Sharia. We have ahadith where the Holy Prophet sends la'anat on somebody who is dhawaq. Dhawaq is somebody who marries a lot of women or who enjoys in a lot of women. Let me just read 2 of these ahadith to you. One of these ahadith says that ما من شيء أحب إلى الله عز وجل من بيت يعمر في الإسلام بالنكاح, that there is nothing more beloved with Allah Azza wa Jal than a house that has been built up in Islam through marriage. And then on the reverse, there is nothing that is more detested to Allah than a house that has been destroyed by divorce. Or about a man who is dhawaq, who just wants to marry women and enjoy in women and then divorce them. We have a hadith that says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ يُبْغِضُ أَوْ يَلْعَنُ كُلَّ ذَوَّاقٍ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَكُلَّ ذَوَّاقَةٍ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. So this does not fit with all these very, very clear evidences about the piety and the personality of Imam al-Hasan, about the isma of Imam al-Hasan. Imam al-Hasan was somebody who was known to be somebody of worship, somebody of zuhud, somebody of taqwa. These are things that the Sunnis and Shias are unanimous upon. That, for example, Sunni sources even narrate that he went to Hajj 25 times without any shoes, barefoot he walked to Hajj. Or in one hadith from Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, it says that that Imam Hassan alayhi salam kana a'bada an-nas fi zamanihi wa azhadahum wa afdalahum, that he was the most ascetic of all men. He was the one who would worship the most of all men. So this doesn't fit. On the one hand, we know that his personality is like so high. On the other hand, we have these very bizarre, strange narrations that say that he married 50 women, or God forbid even more. Some of them say like 200 or 300 women. One of these narrations, just to give you an idea how ridiculous it is, one of these narrations that's there in our Shia books is that Imam Ali goes up on the minbar during the life of Imam Ali. He goes up on the minbar and he says, "Oh people, do not marry your daughters to Hassan." Come on, like what kind of situation is this? That either Imam Ali before this he would have told Imam Hassan and Imam Hassan didn't listen to him, in which case he's committing a sin, or Imam Ali, God forbid, is going publicly and speaking bad about Imam Hassan when he didn't even tell Imam Hassan anything. Both ways, whichever way you look at it, it doesn't make sense. These ahadith cannot be accepted. More evidence is that we have in the books of history, we have the names of his wives, we have the names of his children, we have the names of his son-in-laws, and they are very few. He had 3, maybe 4 son-in-laws. According to Sheikh Mufid, he had 15 children. According to some of the Sunni sources, the very most is that he had 23 children. But even that person who says that he had 23 children, he doesn't bring names for all of them. So it might not really be 23 children. If Imam Hassan married like 200, 300 women, then he would have had many, many more children. He was not infertile at the end of the day. He had kids. So, another very strong piece of evidence is that there were many enemies to Imam al-Hassan. For example, Muawiyah, during his life, there were many people who were against him. As we will see in this sad episode of the Sulh, in his own army, there were so many enemies. In Sham, there were so many enemies. Why is it that we don't have any account of anybody from that time bringing this up. We don't have anything from that, from the Sahaba or from the Tabi'een, from that first century Hijrah. We don't have any account of anybody saying that Imam Hassan was, God forbid, a womanizer. That itself is very indicative that this is fabricated. The only ahadith we have are from the 6th Imam, apparently. And even in the Sunni sources, the accounts go back to like the 2nd century Hijrah. And so, the conclusion that some of our ulama have made is that with all these pieces of evidence, and one more piece that I'm going to say right now, it appears that these were fabricated in the 2nd century Hijrah. By who? By the Banu al-Abbas. There is one story that has been narrated in one of the very important and early books of history called Tarikh of Mas'udi. It's actually called Muruj al-Dhahab, but the author of it is Mas'udi. He narrates how Mansur was the first strong caliph who really established the Banu al-Abbas. His brother before, Saffah, was actually the first caliph, but he didn't live for long after the Banu al-Abbas came into power. The main caliph who really established the rule of the Banu al-Abbas, the same one who had Imam Sadiq alayhi salam poisoned, that was Mansur al-Dawaniqi. So Mansur, one of the things that Mansur was very troubled by was Shia uprisings, was Shias who were standing up and disputing his rule and causing rebellions and fighting against him. In particular, many of these Shias who were fighting him were, guess what? From the descendants of Imam al-Hasan. So in one of these stories in the Tarikh of Mas'udi, Mansur imprisons some of these Sadat who are from the Nasl, from the progeny and lineage of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, and then he gives a sermon. And in that sermon, he mentions these kind of things, that, oh, Imam al-Hasan was just somebody who, as soon as he got power, he let it go to go and marry women, to enjoy in women. So this is a very strong proof, and maybe there's other proofs as well, but this is one of the strong proofs to show that this story seems to go back to the Banu al-Abbas, that they were the ones who first fabricated this. And in any case, with all these other pieces of evidence that I've just mentioned, there's no way that we can accept this. And so this was never an issue. Obviously, Imam Hassan was not somebody who would choose this dunya over the akhirat. If he signed a sulh, there was some reason, some hikmah, some maslahah, some responsibility before Allah that he was fulfilling by signing this truce that inshallah we will try to open up and discuss. Just making sure that everybody's following and you can hear my voice clearly. You don't have any questions? Okay, inshallah, with that, let's go on. What I want to do now is, as quickly as I can, I just want to give you guys an overview of what transpired after the death of Imam Ali alayhi salam. The majority of these time that we have in these two sessions is more going to be put towards analyzing what Imam Hassan did and answering these questions that we will shortly pose. But in order to first understand what actually happened, in order to analyze it, we must first understand exactly what happened. So let's quickly go through what occurred, basically. So the period of Khilafat and rule of Imam al-Hassan lasted from the death of Imam Ali alayhi salam in Ramadan of the year 40 AH and until about Rabi al-Akhir. Again, there's lots of discrepancies and differences of how history has narrated all of these events. Some say Rabi al-Awwal, some say Rabi al-Akhir, some even say Jamadi al-Ula. But the point is, sometime about then was when the peace treaty was signed. In the middle, what happened exactly? So initially, on the 21st of the month of Ramadan, Imam al-Hassan went to the mosque and delivered a very eloquent and beautiful khutbah praising Imam Ali and informing the community that Imam Ali alayhi salam had just died. Everybody broke into tears and wept. Ubaidullah bin Abbas, a very important person we will talk about, he stands up that day in the mosque and calls people to give the bay'ah to Imam al-Hassan. And with an unprecedented support and like zeal and passion, all of Kufa, in fact all of Imam Ali's government from Hijaz to Yemen to Iran, they all gave bay'ah to Imam al-Hasan. Okay, this is very important to keep in mind. The only people who didn't were Muawiyah. Muawiyah was then in charge of Sham and Egypt as well. After waiting for a while, Imam al-Hasan, according to the some of the opinions at least that seem to be stronger, he didn't start preparing for a war right away. Initially, there is an exchange of letters back and forth between Muawiyah and Imam al-Hasan, and Imam al-Hasan, with a lot of strength, is calling Muawiyah that you must give me bay'ah, you must join the Muslims in, you must stop this rebellion of yours, and you don't have a choice basically. You have to give in to my bay'ah, otherwise I will come towards you with an army. In fact, I have prepared a reading assignment for you, dear brothers and sisters, on the website of the academy that is for this page, Academy of Islam / Ali-573. If you go there, there is a PDF. If it's not there, it will be there very soon. A PDF that is a reading assignment for today's session, inshallah. It is an English translation of one of those letters that Imam al-Hasan sent to Muawiyah. A little bit lengthy, but it gives us an idea of how strong and how determined Imam al-Hasan was in those early weeks and early months after his bay'ah. So initially he engages in these kind of letters, correspondence with Muawiyah, but Muawiyah doesn't just disobey and refuse to pledge allegiance. He in fact starts to mobilize an army and sends his army out towards Iraq. We'll talk more about Muawiyah, but basically Muawiyah had now got a golden opportunity. All that time, towards the end of Imam Ali's life, he was trying to defeat Imam Ali. He was launching wars and pillaging different areas, sending armies to Yemen and to Hijaz and to Basra. Imam Ali, on the other hand, was also preparing to fight him. Imam Ali wanted to crush his all these problems that he was causing for the Muslim Ummah. So when Imam Ali died, it was a golden opportunity. Muawiyah wanted to put an end to this conflict between Kufa and Sham and become the exclusive and only leader of the Muslim Ummah. Ahsan, Brother Ali Akbar is informing us that it is there already. Yes, exactly. That letter of Imam al-Hasan to Muawiyah. It's on the website, the reading assignment. Anyways, after this happens, when Muawiyah sends an army, now Imam Hassan has no choice. He has to prepare to fight. He himself starts to mobilize his forces. He goes to the mosque, he gives them a khutbah calling people to come out and fight. Unfortunately, here we begin to see that a lot of people are not obeying Imam al-Hasan. The numbers that we will analyze next week are much, much less than what we would have hoped given this situation. Many less people than what was expected come out and support Imam al-Hasan. Despite that, there is some kind of mobilization and a big army does set out from Kufa. However, not as big as would have been expected. And even that army had so many different factions and so many people that were not loyal to Imam al-Hasan, as we will see. But the point is, Imam al-Hasan, sometime maybe about 2 months after Bay'ah, I saw one thing saying in the month of Safar. I'm not sure if that's true. Like I said, there's many different accounts of how these events transpired. But anyways, he sets out for fighting Muawiyah. In the next slide, we will look at the exact logistics of how Imam Hassan had planned the army, planned the fight to happen. In a very, very strategic, tactical way, Imam Hassan had divided his troops between 2 areas. Between the city of Maskin, where the fight was going to actually happen, and the city of Madain, where he was. Inshallah, we'll look at that in the next slide. Then, after this, Imam Hassan had sent the majority of his army up north to Maskin, where the main fight was going to happen. However, the head of that army, his cousin Ubaidullah bin Abbas, betrays him. Muawiyah bribes him with 1 million coins and he leaves the army at night. He flees the camp of his own army, the army of Imam Hassan, and he goes to the enemy side. In the meantime, Muawiyah is doing whatever he can to not actually fight Imam al-Hasan. His tactics, as they were in the Battle of Siffin when they put the Quran on spears, his tactics were always those of treachery and bribing and doing everything immoral that he could. So one of the things that Muawiyah was very, very good at and used effectively over here was spreading false rumors. In the camp of Imam Hassan that was before him, had come before Muawiyah in Muskin ready to fight, he started spreading rumors that, oh, Imam Hassan has already agreed to a peace treaty. Again, in Madain, same thing. Amongst the people, amongst the camp of Imam Hassan, he starts spreading rumors that, oh, Imam Hassan has already agreed to a peace treaty. And these false rumors have an effect. People's determination is broken. People flee. When Ubaidullah flees, a huge number, like 2/3 of the army that's there of Imam Hassan, also they flee or they go to the side of Muawiyah. So we can see that there's so much chaos and so much betrayal, and people are not united and sincere in supporting Imam al-Hassan. Then there's something else that happens where Imam Hassan gives a khutbah in the city of Madain, hinting at the fact that he might engage in a peace treaty with Muawiyah. Whether he really had that intention at that time, or whether he was just testing his own forces is like a matter of dispute, I think. It's narrated in different ways. But when Imam Hassan gave that khutbah, then like people from his own army said, oh, the man has become a kafir, and they revolted against him. His own Shia, his close Shia, tried to protect him and take him away. But in that time, somebody came close to him and stabbed him in the leg or the thigh so badly that the knife went all the way into, almost like touched the bone, basically. This isn't just an example, or like to get an idea of the situation that Imam al-Hassan was in. Basically, in this situation, at the end he signs this peace treaty where he abdicates the throne. He officially allows Muawiyah to take over and become the sole leader of the Muslim Ummah, with a whole bunch of conditions that are all in the favor of Imam al-Hassan. But of course, Muawiyah doesn't even abide by any one of those conditions. It's very clear that he never had any intention to, and history showed that he did not abide by any of these conditions. So that was just a quick overview of what actually transpired. Before we pose some of these analytical questions that we want to try to answer, I just want to show you a map of the conflict to get an idea of how things were planned by Imam al-Hassan. Like I said, he very strategically planned it in a very, very interesting and amazing kind of way. So if you look in that map, it's in Farsi. If you look in that map ahead of you, in the bottom right, you can see the city of Kufa, and on the left side, beside the huge sea, you can see, what's that, the Mediterranean, I think, beside Palestine. On the left, you can see the city of Damascus, Damashq. So on the north, on the top, is the line is this path that the army of Muawiyah is taking, coming towards Imam al-Hassan to come and fight. They're going north through, for example, the city of Mosul, first Halab, and then they go east and come to Mosul. Not following? Sorry, Brother Ali Akbar, is there? Is it not clear? You cannot see the names? I don't know if there is a way, so I'm just going to have to walk you through it. Inshallah, if you can see the map, then it's good. Otherwise, just listen to me, and inshallah, that will suffice. So basically, from the city of Damascus, Muawiyah's army is coming towards Iraq from the north. That's not that important. The main thing that we want to focus on is that Imam Hassan very strategically divided his forces between two cities. The city of Muskin. Muskin is just a little bit south of Samarra. It's very close to the modern current city of Balad, where one of these very important Sadat is buried. Maybe some of you who have gone to Iraq and Samarra for ziyarah, you might have been there. I believe it's the son of Imam Hassan Askari, Sayyid Muhammad. He's buried over there. Very close to that area, there's a city called Muskin. That was the furthest most point of Imam Ali's government, of Imam Ali's territory. So naturally, when Imam Hassan took over, that was the furthest point of his country, basically. After that, it was the land of Muawiyah. So Imam Hassan had planned that his army would meet the army of Muawiyah up over there in the city of Muskin. Okay? But in order to be able to gather troops from 3 different cities of Kufa, Basra, and Iran. So Iran is not really a city, but 3 of these territories that was under the control of Imam al-Hasan. Imam al-Hasan was hoping that he would get backup troops and extra troops coming in from these different cities or different areas. So Madain was a very strategic location that sat on the crossroads of these 3 different areas. The roads from Kufa came to Madain. The roads from Basra came to Madain. The roads from Iran came to Madain. So Madain was earlier the capital of Persia, Sassanid Persia, that was conquered, of course, by the Muslims under the rule of Umar, under Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. So Madain was a very important city as well, a very big city at that time. Salman al-Farsi had earlier been the governor of the city of Madain. Anyways, point is that Imam Hassan had made this strategic plan where he sent most of his army up ahead to Muskin, whereas he went to Madain where he was going to gather more forces from these other cities, with the plan being that eventually he would also come north to Muskin and join up with Ubaidullah. And the main fight would then happen in the city of Muskin. Just an idea to get an idea of, I just wanted to show you this to get an idea of how Imam Hassan had very strategically planned the war. And you know, one of the very unfortunate things that history has kind of rushed and rashly judged Imam Hassan and Muawiyah is saying that Muawiyah was a very smart person, whereas God forbid Imam Hassan was a very simple-minded person. No, that's not the case. As inshallah we'll try to clarify that over this when we answer these questions that we're going to pose now. It's not a fault on Imam al-Hasan to be bound by the Sharia. On the other hand, it is a fault of Muawiyah to do everything haram and to do anything immoral, to bribe people, to lie, to kill people who are innocent. Muawiyah, if you want to call that being smart, call it being smart. But what that is immorality, basically. Whereas Imam Hassan was a moral person, was somebody who did what he had to do according to his responsibility before Allah. Anyways, so now the main thing that we want to try to analyze in this course, and like I said, the majority of these answers we'll try to quickly do as much as time permits in next week's session, next Saturday. But there are many questions that can be asked here. Some of them are easier and some of them are harder to answer. We could say that, okay, if Imam Hassan's government was so weak that he didn't have any supporters, why did he even take up the Pledge of Allegiance? Why did he accept the bay'ah in the first place? Okay, if he wanted to, you can ask questions from both sides. You can say, why did he do this? Okay, why did he not do this? So the first question was, why did he take the bay'ah of the people? Second question is, if he wanted to eventually fight Muawiyah, why did he delay in fighting Muawiyah? Why didn't he? Because like I said, Imam Ali had already planned to fight. Imam Ali was preparing to fight and had already garrisoned his troops. A huge number of troops were ready to go and fight against Muawiyah when Imam Ali was martyred, when he was hit by Ibn Muljam, la'anatullahi alayh. So the second question is, why did Imam Hassan delay? Why didn't he just start the war that his father was going to do anyways? And then the question is, again, why did he even start a war? Okay, if the situation was so weak that he didn't have supporters, why did he even want to go and fight? Another question is, if Ubaidullah was such a weak person that he could betray Imam al-Hassan, why did Imam Hassan choose him? Were there not any other loyal Shias? There was very loyal Shias. There was somebody called Qais who was the head of the army during Imam Ali's time, and Imam Hassan made him to be the second in charge after Ubaidullah. Why didn't Imam Hassan just appoint him to be the first person in charge? Another question, if Imam Hassan's army was so full of bad people who were not loyal to him, so full of Khawarij, so full of spies from Muawiyah's side, why didn't he filter them out? Wasn't there a way that he could have said that, okay, I only want sincere Shias to come with me? Couldn't he have somehow got rid of those other elements from his army? Then, the fundamental questions, those are all kind of smaller side questions. The fundamental question is this, that why did he sign a peace treaty? Is it not the honor of the Ahlul Bayt to become shaheed? Did not his brother Imam Hussein in Karbala fight until the very end even though he was outnumbered? Why did Imam Hassan not do that? Why did he sign a peace treaty and essentially abdicate the throne and allow Muawiyah to take over and be the unrivaled sole ruler of the Muslim Ummah? And the last and final question that I will just expound upon is this peace treaty. Okay, if we believe that Imam Hassan is ma'asum, everything he does is in line with the teachings of Islam, how is this peace treaty that is allowing Muawiyah, this corrupt, fasiq, zalim, horrible person, to take over and lead the Muslims, how is that in line with Islamic teachings? I just want to try to expound upon that last question, since that is the fundamental question that we want to try to answer in this course. You see, one of the mistakes that is often made when we look at the lives of the Imams, alayhimussalam, is that we look at each of them as being a different person. We see Imam Ali and we imagine this amazing warrior who lifted the gate of Khaybar, and of course all these other fada'il that he had. But we don't think of that same kind of perfection when we think of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. We think Imam Sajjad, okay, he was on his musalla, he was crying, he was doing dua, but he was not a warrior. We wouldn't think of him as a warrior. And so we kind of, in our mind, we might actually say that actually their goals were different goals. What they were aiming towards was a different aim. No. That is very, very incorrect. That goes against the Shia understanding of Isma. If we believe that the Imam is ma'asum, then every one of the Imams has the exact same goal. What is that goal? That goal is to take their society towards ubudiyah, towards perfection. Servitude of Allah is the perfection of man. And so that goal is to wake people up and take them towards that path of servitude. And so all the Imams were doing the exact same job. There's no difference between the first Imam and the second Imam and the third Imam. It's as if they are one person that just continued to live over this 250-year period of time. Then why is it that we don't see them doing the exact same thing? Why is it that we see that Imam Sajjad was more engaging in ibadah, and Imam Sadiq, perhaps we can say, was more engaging in teaching fiqh and usul and these kind of subjects in Medina? Why is it that we see that different Imams did different things in their lives? The answer is that the world that they lived in, the community that they were surrounded by, forced them to act in a different way. But that doesn't mean that their goals were different goals. You can see this map, I'm sure, on the slide, right? It's a map that I put together in one of the previous sessions to kind of illustrate the same point. The point I was making is that, look, between that map, if you can see the starting point on the bottom left of the map and the end goal on the right side, which is Al-Mustafa Islamic University. This is a map of Qom, somebody going from one of the roads in Qom to one of the main centers of the Hawza for foreign students, Al-Mustafa. You can see that the road that you have to take to go there, for a while it goes one way, it goes down. For a while it goes up. For a while it goes to the right side. For a while it goes to the left side. If you were to see somebody traversing that path, would you say, oh my God, they're not going in the right direction? A minute ago they were going to the left, now they're going to the right. A month ago they were going, or not, this won't take you a month. A few minutes ago they were going down, now they're going up. If you were to say such a thing, that would be a very hasty judgment, and that would be a wrong conclusion. The correct conclusion is that no, they are going in the right direction. The only thing is that the road forces them to kind of move in this way. There's sometimes where you have to walk a bit slowly. There's sometimes where you have to walk very fast. There's sometimes where you have to go to the right. There's sometimes where you have to go to the left. It's the exact same thing with the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. There was a time where Imam Ali, forget about opposing the Khulafa who had usurped his right. He actually had to help them. He had to work with them. Did he agree with what they had done? Of course not. But he had to help them. The situation forced him at that time to help them. There were other times where the Imams were planning for a short time. They were planning for the short term, that they were going to take back their right very soon. They were going to launch a rebellion start a movement and uproot get rid of the oppressive rulers and make a just Islamic system. There were other times where there was no way that could have happened. So they were working towards the long term. They were working towards preparing the Shia community, moving them step by step forward so that one day that goal could have been reached. Again, what is that goal? That goal is to establish a proper Islamic society, a pure Islamic society where the law of Allah is implemented, such that people can reach their perfection of servitude to Allah. One of the proofs that we can give, there's so many proofs I'm sure we can give for this, but one of the very obvious, clear proofs is this famous ziyarah that I'm sure you all are very familiar with, called Ziyarat Aminullah. It's a very beautiful, very short, very, very authentic ziyarah that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, when he went to the blessed grave of his grandfather in Najaf, al-Ashraf, he addressed Imam Ali with this ziyarah: Assalamu alayka ya amin Allahi fi ardih wa ya hujjatahu ala ibadihi. In that ziyarah, one of the lines is this: Ashhadu annaka jahadta fillahi haqqa jihadihi. That I swear by Allah, I bear witness that you did jihad, the true haqq of jihad. You carried out that jihad. Now our ulama, Zahiran from ahadith, apparently from ahadith, our ulama have told us that this ziyarah is not just for Imam Ali. It is a ziyarah that is meant to be recited at any of the harams, any of the ma'asum, any of the imams. You go to any of their graves, you should recite. One of the best ziyarat to recite is this ziyarah of Aminullah. So this ziyarah is itself a testament to the fact that all of the imams were mujahid. All of them were struggling against the enemies of Islam. All of them were struggling to establish Islamic values. Jihad means that. Jihad means to struggle against the enemies of Islam. And so that's what I just wanted to say, that when we look at the history of the Imams, we have to look at it in that light, that they were all working towards that same goal. And in that light, now we have to pose this question, that how did the sulh of Imam al-Hasan help the cause of Islam? How did it help that single goal that all of the Imams had? That's what we want to try to answer. You guys are being quiet. Is there any questions, any comments? My voice is still coming clearly, right? Somebody, one of the brothers at Yakra, asked for another proof. I mean, if you want an intellectual proof, I think it's very clear from what I just said that they all have that very profound, complete understanding of Islam. We can call it isma, we can call it a complete understanding of Islam that should move them in the same direction. They all understand what society needs. The aim of establishing an Islamic society. Okay, that I think just the simple fact that, you know, we have so many, if you look at the Sharia, if you look at the Holy Quran, for example, in Surah Al-Hadid, we have this verse, لِيَقُومَ النَّاسِ, that the prophets were sent, لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. Or we have other verses that like, وَلَا something لِلَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا وَلَا تَرْكَنُوا إِلَى الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا. This idea that Islamic laws apply to society is very, very profound, that like it should be something that Muslims are not happy with when they see the law of Allah being disobeyed everywhere around them. There's much more that can be said about, even like if you look at the lives of every one of the Imams, this is very clear that they were working towards that. Actually, if you want proof, Brother Ali Akbar, I would request you to go and look at some of the previous classes that I taught for the Academy. The recordings are there. There's 4 sessions called the social political role of the Imams, where I discussed it in a lot of detail. Of course, much more detail is there, but this was just a beginning of like the Imams' interaction, very harsh interaction with the Khulafa. Different Imams, the 5th Imam, 6th Imam, 7th Imam, 10th Imam, we see their very, very strong reaction against the Khulafa. Or we see their very strong rebuke of ulama and poets who are helping those unjust governments. There's one story where there was somebody called Zuhri, one of these very, very, very outstanding ulama who was working for the court of the Banu Umayyah. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam in Tuhaf al-Uqul, he has a harsh letter very harsh letter where he tells Zuhri that you are responsible for giving a beautiful face to these oppressors. Anyways, I would refer you to that, and inshallah, let's not get sidetracked. There's one more discussion I want to engage in before the end of this session today, which is about Muawiyah specifically. Inshallah, if you want, after the class is finished, I can stick around and discuss things in more detail. The other question is from Sister Zahra: where were the rest of the children of Imam Ali at the time of Imam Hassan? They were there with Imam Hassan. Imam Hussein was there with Imam Hassan. In fact, there is a interesting point with when the people pledged allegiance to Imam Hassan. One of the books of history says that some of these Khawarij, they wanted to only pledge allegiance to Imam Hassan on the condition that he fights Muawiyah. And Imam Hassan very, very smartly, he tells them, no, if you're going to pledge allegiance to me, you have to do it unconditionally. You have to fight with me if I'm fighting Muawiyah, and you have to sit down and be quiet if I sign a peace treaty. So I want unconditional allegiance. At this time, these Khawarij, they go to Imam Hussein and they say that we'll pledge allegiance to you instead, and with this condition that we fight Muawiyah. Imam Hussein said, no way, as long as Imam Hassan is there, there's no way I'm gonna take anybody's allegiance. So Imam Hussein was there. Other children of Imam Ali must have been there as well in the city of Kufa. Okay, the last discussion, no problem. The last discussion that inshallah we want to look at today, which is a fundamental key to understanding a lot of those questions that we posed. It's a very, very important thing that has been misunderstood by historians and Orientalists, such as that Orientalist Philip Hitti, whose name I gave earlier. You see, these people, they didn't understand the reality of the fight between Muawiyah and Imam Ali. They didn't understand the reality of the fight between Muawiyah and Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. In their simplistic view, these historians saw it as two people fighting for the throne of the Muslims. These were two Muslims. Okay, maybe Imam Hassan was a little bit more religious. Okay, fine, we agree. Imam Hassan was a little bit of a better person than Muawiyah. But at the end of the day, these are two people fighting for power. That's it. That's not the case. That's not the case at all. And I want to show you with a few stories, and then inshallah we'll wrap it up. This was not a fight between two people. This was a fight between two ideologies that were represented by Kufa and Sham. What were these two ideologies? If we want to use Islamic terminology, it's very simple. This was a fight between Shirk and Tawhid. See, everything that Imam Hassan represented was servitude to Allah. I just said a few minutes earlier that he was chained by the Sharia. He would only do what was moral and what was right, as his father before him. Everything that he represented was submission to Allah, Tawheed, everything good. Whereas Muawiyah was the other extreme. There was no loyalty to Islam in Muawiyah, as we will see. Muawiyah was ready to do whatever he wanted, to trample upon the very basics of the Sharia, as he did in so many occasions. He was ready to throw out any kind of morality to achieve his power, to save his life, to get his goal, to enjoy in pleasure. The reality is this, that we can't just simplify it and say that, oh, okay, at the end of the day, Islam is in power, and if Imam Hassan abdicates, it's not a big deal because he shouldn't even maybe fight for it, because at the end of the day, it's another Muslim ruler. Okay, that Muslim ruler is not that pious, but whatever, it's not a big deal. At least it's a Muslim in power. No. Muawiyah represents shirk. Muawiyah is somebody who has no loyalty to Islam. And if he was in power, we can only imagine what he would have done if he had absolute full power without any of the Ahlul Bayt there alive. We'll talk about this next week, inshallah. Very quickly, I want to just give you guys a few points about Muawiyah and then give you some very, very interesting stories, and then we'll wrap it up. So basically, how did Muawiyah become the leader of Sham? When Abu Bakr and Umar, the first two caliphs, were conquering these Muslim lands in the early years after the demise of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, there were very, very important wars that happened on two fronts. One of the fronts was the front of Iran, the Sassanid Persians in Iran and Iraq. Okay? The other very important front was that of the Byzantine Empire in the west. That is the area of Sham and Palestine and Egypt. And so at that time, when those armies were sent by Abu Bakr to go and fight against the Romans, and by the way, both Iran and Rome suffered like phenomenal historical defeats at the hands of the Muslims. The Muslims in those early years were like invincible fighters. With a very small number of people, they would kill and like they would kill and defeat huge armies of the enemy. And that itself is rooted in the fact that Islam was still very pure and sincere in those years. Even though the caliphate had been usurped and the Ahlul Bayt were not in power, the Muslims had a lot of that beautiful, pure Islam that the Prophet had taught them. The Islam of simplicity, the Islam of sacrifice, the Islam of giving everything for the sake of Allah. So those Muslims were invincible fighters, and they dealt the Persians and the Romans such a defeat that afterwards they would not dare to invade Muslim lands for a very long time. Anyways, at that time when Abu Bakr was sending armies to go and fight the Romans, one of the heads of the Muslim armies was the son of Abu Sufyan, the older brother of Muawiyah, whose name was also Yazid bin Abu Sufyan. Yazid became the leader of Syria, and he was appointed as the head. After the Muslims conquered that area, he was appointed as the head of Sham. And when he died from a plague, that many important Muslims died in Syria from a plague at that time. When he died, Muawiyah took over. So Muawiyah ruled for maybe 15 years or so before the caliphate of Imam Ali as the governor of Umar and then Uthman. Okay? And then, of course, during the whole time that Imam Ali was in power, he was still ruling and rebelling against Imam Ali. After the peace treaty, then for like another 20 years, he ruled as the sole leader of the Muslim world from Sham. In these almost 40 years that Muawiyah ruled Sham, Muawiyah had made his position very strong in Sham. He had brainwashed the entire country of Sham to believe that he was an amazing religious person, and they would listen to whatever he said. This is the shirk that I'm talking about, that there was no like loyalty to the real Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. Whatever Muawiyah said would be the law in Sham. He was like an idol to the people of Sham. Okay? Muawiyah had very strategically and smartly and cunningly planned that there would be nobody who would not toe the line in Sham. When there was somebody like Abu Dhar, he got rid of Abu Dhar very quickly. He made sure that nobody would be there to oppose his brainwashing of the people. And so he had formed a country that was very strong in security. There was no risk of the Romans invading again. They were all Arabs. They were all listening to Muawiyah. They were all united. And that was his country and his army. Now, in the end of today's session, although the time is done, so if any of you have to go, don't worry. I wanted to just give a few stories. I'll try to make it very quick to show how Abu Sufyan and Muawiyah, there's no difference between the two of them. Abu Sufyan 50 years earlier was fighting against Medina and against the Prophet. He was the symbol of shirk, the symbol of opposition to Islam. 50 years later, it is his son Muawiyah who is the symbol of shirk and opposition to Islam. The only difference is that he was forced to pretend like he was a Muslim. He had to walk the walk. And so till now, Sunnis might consider Muawiyah to be a Muslim, but the reality was no, he had no sense of loyalty to Islam, and he is not what we can call a Muslim leader. So a few stories I want to quickly give. One was about Abu Sufyan. Two are about Abu Sufyan during the time of Uthman. I'll say them very quickly in English. I have the primary sources in Arabic if anybody's interested. Abu Sufyan, when Uthman became the third caliph, once he was an old blind man at that time. He lived till this time, and he was old and blind. Once he came to a group of the Banu Umayyah and he asked them that, is there anybody here other than us? And they told him, no, it's just us. Because he was blind, he couldn't see. And then he told them that now that we have got the power, you must seize it like a ball and pass it from amongst one of you to the other. You see, this is how Abu Sufyan looked at the caliphate of Uthman. That now we, the Banu Umayyah, have finally won. And we have got the power for ourselves. Another time it is narrated that he went to the grave of Hamza and he's addressed Hamza. Hamza's title was Abu Amara. He said, "Oh, Aba Amara, that thing that me and you we were fighting over, now it is in our hands. We have won." See? And it wasn't just Abu Sufyan. Muawiyah was the same. This was how Muawiyah was. This was how the true Shia understood Muawiyah to be even at that time. In the Battle of Siffin, there's a very beautiful story where somebody is confused and he comes to Imam Ali and says that, like, I don't know where's the haqq and where's the batil. We're all people who are Muslim. We're all people who are reading Quran. Imam Ali sends him to Ammar. He says, go and ask Ammar ibn Yasir. Ammar tells this man that, by Allah, he says, I swear that, see this flag of the enemy? I fought against this flag 3 times with the Prophet, and now I am fighting against this flag today. I fought against this flag in Badr and in Uhud and in Hunayn, and now today in Siffin, I'm fighting against that same flag. See, Ammar understood the reality that that force, that front of Muawiyah was the same front of Abu Sufyan and animosity to Islam. Okay, the last story that I very quickly say, because I've gone over my time limit, is this last one, that one of the henchmen of Muawiyah, one of the very, very evil enemies of the Ahlul Bayt and supporters of Muawiyah, was somebody whose name was Mughira. Just give me a second, I'll load up the story here before me. Okay, so yeah, the story is this, that Mughira, one of these men of Muawiyah, his own son narrates this account, that one day Mughira comes to his son and he's very sad. Mughira would go and have these private meetings with Muawiyah, and he would normally be like really impressed by how smart Muawiyah was, and he would come back and praise Muawiyah. One day he comes back to his son. His son's name is Mutraf or Mitraf, something like that. He comes to Mutraf and he's very sad, and Mutraf doesn't know what's going on. So he asks his father, what's happened? And this guy, Mughira, who himself is a very horrible person, an enemy of the Ahlul Bayt, Mughira tells his son that, oh my son, I just came from the most wretched of all men, from the most filthy of all men. And then his son asks him, what happened? And he says that today I was with Muawiyah, and I told him, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, he's telling Muawiyah, Mughira is telling Muawiyah, he said, I told him, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, that why don't you now show a little bit of justice and be a bit nicer? You've now become an old man, Muawiyah. He says, your brother is from the Banu Hashim. There's nothing that they can do against you now. There's nothing for you to be scared of with regards to them. You are the only caliph. So this is after the peace treaty, clearly, the peace treaty with Imam Hassan. So Mughira is telling Muawiyah that, why don't you be a bit nicer to them now? Things are all in your favor. You're totally in power. Be a bit nicer to the Banu Hashim. What does Muawiyah say? He says, never, never. He says, that man from the clan of Taym, referring to Abu Bakr, he said that man from the tribe of Taym was the leader and showed justice for a while. And when he died, his name died with him. Only sometimes people mention him and they say Abu Bakr. Then after him, the one from the tribe of Adi, referring to Umar, he said he came and he ruled for 10 years and he tried so hard, he worked really hard. But again, when he died, his name died with him. Only sometimes people mention him and they say the name Umar. After him, our brother Uthman became the leader. And nobody was as honorable in his lineage as Uthman. He worked so hard, but when he died, his name died with him. And then Muawiyah says, but look at the name of this Hashimi, referring to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Muawiyah says, look at the name of this Hashimi man, that every day 5 times people have to shout out his name and say, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, with this situation, how can I be nice to the Banu Hashim? No, we need to bury this name of the Holy Prophet as well. This is actually a narration that when Ma'mun, the Abbasid Caliph, heard this, he openly declared his bara'at from Muawiyah, and he forbade people to speak good things about Muawiyah. This is a narration that's there in the books of history. And so it just gives us an idea of what an evil person Muawiyah was, and what he represented. Inshallah, like I said, this is a very key point that we need to digest and understand to answer these puzzling questions that we posed, which, inshallah, with the help of Allah, next week in our next session, we will try to answer them. With that, I will end, and I'm around, inshallah. I see one person has asked questions. If anybody else has any questions, I'll stick around for a little while. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. One question is that during that time, couldn't the people see how Muawiyah had manipulated and they knew how Imam was? What factors led to the people not being able to see reality? It's a very good question. Definitely some people, like I said, those people in the country of Sham, for example, they had been totally brainwashed. They didn't even know the truth. Okay? They didn't even know who the Ahlul Bayt were. They actually thought Muawiyah was the person who used to write the Quran initially when it was revealed, and they used to call him the uncle of the believers and so on. But that wasn't the case in Kufa and in other parts of the Muslim world. You see, I guess this is a sister, right? I don't know. I was going to say, you see, sister, there were a lot of people who knew the reality of who the Ahlul Bayt were, but they couldn't swallow that bitter reality of living under the justice of one of the Imams. You see, after the Prophet's demise, when the first three caliphs came into power, they took this whole society away from Islamic values, and Muslims became really, really, really filthy rich. There became a class system of like the elite who would have so much money, and the many people who are poor. There was like rampant sin, music and alcohol were being enjoyed in everywhere. And like in the Sarzamina Wahi in Makkah and Medina, there was like a lot of alcohol and music. So people had like forgotten about that true Islamic spirituality that had become common at the time of the Prophet. And so as a result, people couldn't bear that harsh justice of the Ahlul Bayt. They knew that if one of the Imams was in power, that's it. There was not going to be any more favoritism. There was not going to be any more unequal distribution of wealth. So a lot of people who were influential, strong people, they didn't want Imam Ali or Imam Hassan to rule. They knew totally well that they were on the haqq, that Imam Ali, Imam Hassan were the right people, but they couldn't bear to have them as their rulers. So I think that's the important thing to keep in mind. How can we not become like those? It's a very good question. I mean, at the very least, we need to know what we are working towards, that what are true Islamic values, and then trying our best to inculcate those in our lives and being very careful of our actions. It's something that maybe needs a longer discussion. Okay, if there's no more questions, then we will end, inshallah. Thank you very much. I hope it was beneficial, and inshallah, I look forward to seeing you next week. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi.